Okay, so it's official. We are beginning our very first in our winter webinar series of getting to know St. Anne's a little bit better. And so we have some current parents on tonight to join us. We have, as I said, our head of school, Barry Davis, and our director of equity and inclusion, and also our librarian, Amy Shepard, who you're going to get to spend a good deal of the evening with tonight. But I want to welcome you and welcome all those who are listening to join us and get to know St. Anne's on a more intimate level, to understand a little bit better the work that we do, how it connects to our overall mission, and how we look to continue to grow ourselves as not only as a school, but as a community that learns together and grows together. And so I mentioned Amy Shepard, who has been at St. Anne's for quite some time, longer than me. I've been at St. Anne's for about 12 years. But Amy brings a great deal of depth and breadth in her experience, work in DEI, as well as her experience as a parent of 3 children who attended St. Anne's. And so I'm really excited to be able to share this evening with you all and have Amy join us. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy, have her tell a little bit more about herself, and then we have a presentation that we're going to be going through, and we invite questions throughout, and we'll leave some time at the end as well. So without further ado, I introduce you to Miss Amy Shepard.
Thanks, Val. Well, as Val said, my name is Amy Shepard. I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at St. Anne's, as well as the librarian. This is my 17th school year at St. Anne's. I started off as part-time kindergarten, part-time librarian, and quickly moved after 4 years to being the head librarian, the full-time librarian, and then also moved into diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I have 3 daughters. All 3 went through St. Anne's from pre-K through 8th grade. My oldest is now graduating college. I have a college freshman and I have a high school sophomore. So we have spent a lot of time at St. Anne's, and we've been involved in so many different areas just because it's been a family commitment for so many years. I fell easily into DEI work because I feel like my whole life has been dedicated to DEI work. As a biracial woman of color, African American, I feel like all of my conversations since I was very young were race-based. You know, I faced a lot of microaggressions growing up with being a woman of color and looking the way I look. People weren't really sure what I am, right? So I got a lot of questions. What are you? All the time. As a very young person, I had to learn how to answer that question and do it diplomatically and do it kindly and do it with love. Or where are you from? No, where are you really from? Well, where are your parents from, right? To get the answer that people were looking for. And I just wasn't able to supply them with whatever answer they were looking for. So I've been well versed in having race-based conversations since I was a little child. So I was excited to stumble upon St. Anne's when we moved from Philadelphia to North Wilmington and then to Middletown to find out about St. Anne's, because at our very first open house, they talked about their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I knew that I wanted my girls to be in a school where they were going to be safe and they were going to be able to engage in these kind of conversations with love and in a controlled environment. So we quickly fell in love with St. Anne's. As you hear many people say, as soon as they walked through the red doors, they knew. That was our experience, and we've been there 17 years. So that's kind of how I came to find St. Anne's and get involved with the diversity, equity, and inclusion work there. After my first year at the school, I got immediately involved into the diversity committee. At that time, it was a committee of parents, board members, and faculty members. And that year, that second year that I was there, they were busy drafting St. Anne's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Val, if it's okay, I'd like to start there tonight.
Yes.
And actually just read it aloud because it's a very powerful statement. And it was a collaboration from so many different people in the community. with one person spearheading it and really taking the time. I think it was a sabbatical they were on, and writing this with a lot of love and dedication. So St. Anne's is committed to nurturing a learning community that is free from intolerance and prejudice. We seek to witness to the splendor of God's creation and to honor the dignity of the individual human spirit by including faculty, students, administrators, staff, and trustees from diverse cultural, racial, religious, family, and economic backgrounds in our community. The rich diversities of people and the many perspectives they bring serve to enhance the quality of educational experiences at our school. At St. Anne's, we seek to create an environment in which differences are honored and celebrated. We believe that including people with diverse backgrounds, beliefs, and experiences enriches our community, makes our learning environment more intellectually stimulating, and helps children learn the crucial skill of working productively with people different from themselves. We aspire to create a community in which diversity thrives through our classroom and programs, admissions, hiring, and board recruitment practices, our student and adult diversity committees, and our academic studies. Together, we seek to foster a community that is sensitive to issues of social justice, mindful of the experiences people of diverse backgrounds have in our school, and active in its pursuit of equity and justice within our school community, as well as beyond our campus borders. I just thought that was beautifully written, and it really expresses how we feel at St. Anne's, and we strive every day to fulfill that mission.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, I'm curious, when you first read that commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion many years ago, and you look at it now, what stands out, and perhaps maybe what has changed for you in where we sit as a school now?
Oh, I see we've grown so much. So what stood out to me was just that being a school in which differences are honored and celebrated. And I witnessed that from the very beginning. We have a Culture Day celebration now, but there was also a Culture Day celebration that looked different then. And I just loved it. I just loved that my kids were going to get to learn about themselves and learn about other people. And we still do that today. How we've grown from a place where 17 years ago, the thing to say was kind of like, well, we don't see color. We just love everyone for who they are. And, we're all the same. But really now we can say, I do see color and I love color. And it's really important that we have all of these differences, all of the different identities in the school, whether it be racial or ethnic, religious, socioeconomic, all of our diversities come together, and we honor those and we celebrate those, and we don't say that we don't see them, right? We appreciate them, right? So that's where I think we've grown.
I've witnessed that as well in my time at St. Anne's, from the over 10 years that I've been there. I think we're more equipped with the language, and a lot of that is due to your leadership and the work that you've done. And I know things that you're going to talk about with us this evening in helping to guide us as students, but also as adults, whether it be faculty and staff or us as parents as well.
Yes. So the foundation of DEI work at St. Anne's really has two main components, and those are love and education. So everything we do at St. Anne's, we come from a place of love, right? Everyone in the community needs to feel that they're loved, that they're seen for who they really are, that they're known. And I just feel like approaching DEI work from love, we can't go wrong, right? The kids know that this is a safe place. It's a safe place to make mistakes. We're learning all together. If we plant those seeds of love now, then we're going to grow into people who treat others the way that we want to be treated. We'll grow into people who are more selfless instead of selfish, and we'll grow into people who are going to go out in the world and do good and treat other people with kindness and respect and mercy and love justice. And then the other component is education. Of course, at St. Anne's, we value top quality education in all content areas. But before we can even focus on doing that well, I feel like we really need to get to know ourselves and our identities, our individual identities, our identity as a school, and our identity as a larger community. Once we do that well, then I think we have that really strong foundation to absorb everything, whether it be STEM, mathematics, literacy, all of the other content areas. We have that strong foundation, and then we can go off to just get that top quality education in all areas. As the evening goes on, I'd like to share more specifics about how we deliberately engage in conversations about anti-racist work or social justice, history, and identity. And we'll talk about that as we get into the curriculum.
That's great. I love how you broke this out into those two components. And when we look at the core tenets of St. Anne's of respect, responsibility, and compassion, and we look at what we've written over time about St. Anne's being a place where children are known, loved, challenged, and inspired for the future. This really does a great job of highlighting that fact of, do we see children, and do we know them, and do we really understand them? And I love the way you broke that down, because it really aligns so nicely with all of the work that we do at St. Anne's.
It does. Children know if you're putting in the time to get to know who they really are. They feel that love. And children love to see themselves reflected in their classroom and in their school. So what I'd really like to do this evening is kind of define what those words diversity, equity, and inclusion mean for us at St. Anne's. So this slide is diversity. Diversity just means who's in our community, right? Who are the people that make up St. Anne's? And I have some demographics here. These are from last school year, and these are also family reported demographics. Not everyone has to report if they don't want to, but these are from the families that decided to report. So last school year, we had 120 male students, 128 female students. 65% reported that they were white, 15% African American, 11% multiracial, and 9% Asian American. And the religions observed in our community were Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, and Judaism. And really, truly, we know there's a lot more diversity in our community than which you can show on a screen. You can't really quantify with statistics. There is a vast diversity of thought and passions and learning styles that we just can't put on a screen. So there's much more to our diversity than what meets the eye. The next word that I want to define is equity. And that really just means, does everyone have fair access to resources? And I love to show these graphics when I talk about equity, because I think they very beautifully and very clearly illustrate the difference between equality and equity. So if you look at the first graphic on the left, you see a family going bike riding, and the top box represents equality. Each person has the same bike, right? They were provided with the same tool, but it doesn't really necessarily meet everyone's needs the way they need to be met. So we have, it looks like it's a family. The father here is riding the bike. He's hunched over, looks quite uncomfortable riding his bike. And this perhaps could be the mom, and she looks very comfortable. The bike fits her well. And then the child is struggling to reach the pedals and cannot sit on the seat. Yet they each have the same size bike. The bottom picture represents equity, where everyone has the size bike that they need. So we have the first person with a taller bike, and he looks like he is able to ride comfortably. This person here has the same size bike and is still quite comfortable. And then we have the child who's on a smaller bike and is able to ride comfortably. So then as you look at the picture on the right, it's very similar. We have three people trying to look at a game. All three people have a box to stand on. That represents equality. The second picture, the box has been removed from the first person because it's not needed, and he is still able to watch the game comfortably. The second person still has one box to stand on and can see the game. And then the third person now has two boxes, and they can now see the game, whereas they couldn't in the first box, and that represents equity. This picture, however, has a third slot here, and that represents justice. So really, the thing that was blocking the people from seeing the game in the first place was that fence. So that fence was removed, that obstacle was removed, and that represents justice. So at St. Anne's, we really try to make sure that everyone is getting what they need. We try to meet kids where they are and provide the resources that they need.
Amy, you might talk about this in a moment, but I wonder if you might just speak with regard to the way you categorize and define these words. Can you talk a little bit about how we do that with children at St. Anne's? So, how we might define these words at developmentally appropriate levels for our youngest children, let's say, to our oldest children, who really all need to be engaged in these conversations.
Right. So with our youngest children, a lot of times, well, as librarian too, it's very easy. We weave in picture books, right? Children's books. And we actually read picture books with our entire school community, from our very youngest kids at 3 all the way through with our 8th graders. And one of the ways we do this, and I am going to talk about it, is our picture book initiative. So we have a picture book initiative where we all read in this community the same book. Could be the same day. This year is more like the same week, and it has a DEI focus. So a lot of those vocabulary words come up in the picture books that we read. And also sometimes with our very youngest students, it may not actually be the word equity, but we're teaching about fairness. We're teaching about meeting people's needs. We might be reading books about empathy and justice, as if someone being, treated with love and treated fairly. So it depends. As we move through the grades, definitely the actual vocabulary words are introduced, and we have adopted a new curriculum this year that I'm going to talk about that very formally introduces some of these words.
Great.
So
I think that's a good segue into our next slide.
Okay. So the next slide, I'd like to define the word inclusion. And so now that we know what diversity is, it's, we have all these people that bring all of these wonderful qualities to the school. We focused on equity. We feel confident that everybody's getting what they need. Inclusion is really, are all community members showing up as their authentic selves, able to flourish and fully embrace all that the school has to offer. So even though we feel like we're doing our very best to meet everyone's needs, is everyone really taking advantage of everything at St. Anne's? I'll be honest, my first couple of years at St. Anne's, I was pretty much focused on assimilating. My kids were very focused on assimilating. They would kind of dial back who they really were and were trying to fit in. And I was doing that too, I'll be honest. And after a few years and after getting more comfortable, then we felt like we could share more of who we are. And we really want that at St. Anne's to happen from day one now, right? So we are being very deliberate in our practices, our equity practices, and our inclusion practices, so that kids don't have to wait a year or two to feel comfortable and show up. We want them to show up as close to day one as possible and to thrive in our community. So some places where equitable and inclusive practices show up at St. Anne's, number one, in our curriculum, we try to meet kids where they are with differentiated instruction. Some kids might need more attention in an area. Some kids might need to be extended. Some kids might need support. So we really focus on differentiated instruction, which is wonderful. And then the part that I personally am really super excited about, this year we have adopted a new DEI curriculum, and it's called the Pollyanna Racial Literacy Curriculum. I learned about this at a conference called the People of Color Conference that is put on by the National Association of Independent Schools. And when I sat in this session, I knew right away that it was perfect for us at St. Anne's. I had been looking for quite a few years for a curriculum, and I just couldn't put my hands on one. So when I saw this, I knew that it would fit in with our community beautifully. And as it turns out, the National Association of Episcopal Schools also backs this curriculum. So many, many schools are now adopting it and putting it into place. The curriculum starts in kindergarten and goes all the way through 8th grade, and it's broken down into 4 components, and that's identity, and then diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because it starts in kindergarten, we spent some time over the summer modifying it so that even our preschoolers and pre-Kers are getting some of this deliberate DEI education. With it, like I said before, we always start with identity work. I really feel very strongly that we can't be successful in the other areas unless we know who we are. I need to know who I am as a person and as an educator. I need to know what all of my identities are and how they intersect, because that affects how I come into the community. It affects how the kids show up. It affects how the teachers show up. It affects how we interact with each other. So that's the basis. And that starts with in preschool. You'll hear like all about me. Kids are doing all about me posters and things with their families. And then that extends all the way through 8th grade, even into our faculty. We do identity work. And then even in our community, through one of our affinity groups, we're doing identity work as well. So I think that's really important. The other component that's really strong in the Pollyanna racial literacy curriculum is history, right? So we're learning about history, not only of ourselves, but now we're learning about the history of people from all over the world, many cultures, many countries, American history, but not just from a single perspective. We are learning this history from multiple perspectives. Who were the people involved, right? We know that there was more than just one side or one group involved in many stories, most stories. So who are the other people? Who haven't we learned about? And how did this incident in history affect them? How have these things kind of focused or formed who we are today and what we're facing in 2021? So that's the Pollyanna racial literacy curriculum. I'm very excited about it. It's our first year, so I can't wait to see how we grow into that and what we can add, because part of it, as we wrote the curriculum, we have columns and spaces for us to add what we already do, because so many wonderful things are already happening in the classrooms that will just enhance this curriculum. I spoke about our picture book initiative. The range of topics, DEI topics, are wide. We've read books about food insecurity, about the importance of pronouncing people's names correctly, about where names come from and their meaning and how important they are. We've read books about people from various cultures and the contributions that they've made. So that is really wide ranging. And not only do we just read the books, but we do activities with them to extend the books into the community as well.
And Amy, I believe the books that are chosen are now creating a diverse library in each classroom as well, yes. Correct? Yes. So each classroom has its own copy of the book so that it isn't a one and done experience for the kids.
Exactly, Val. Thank you for bringing that up. So each grade level gets this beautiful hardcover picture book that becomes a part of the classroom library. And now this is our third school year doing it. So the library is really starting to grow. And the kids get so excited when they see the book. Like, oh, we read that book, even though they'll see it in every classroom. They love it and they read them over and over again. So it's really a fun part of the curriculum, I think. Equitable and inclusive practices also show up in our library and classroom materials. We really want to make sure that kids can see themselves in the books that we read, the books that we have on our shelves, our puzzles, our toys, our posters. It's very important that kids see themselves reflected in our school building. In our teachers' classroom management techniques, it can even be as simple as like the popsicle stick method to call on students, so that not the same student is being called on all the time, or maybe there's someone who's hardly called on ever, right? So we pay attention to the way we do all of these things in our classrooms. We do have a distance learning program that's provided for families in need. We have diverse chapel services and devotions where we celebrate the traditions of other faiths. We have uniforms so that kids can focus more on what's happening in the classroom and less on what they're wearing and having to feel like they have to have a certain brand that they wear to school. And our sports teams, students that wish to participate in sports in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade have the opportunity to. So it's not like they're cut from the team if they don't have the skills necessary to play. Everyone gets a chance to play. So those are just some of the areas that I was thinking about where equitable and inclusive practices show up at St. Anne's, but there are a myriad of ways. There's so many ways that it does, and it's hard to really put down on paper.
I think that's a really good point, and I think something that that I see happening all the time is conversations that are continuing based on who our student population is at any point in time. So there really aren't borders or limits necessarily on what those practices, those equitable practices might be. And I love that you bring up the popsicle stick example, as I've seen and I've witnessed teachers looking at how kids participate in the classroom, where many years ago there really was one way to participate, and if you weren't raising your hand or you weren't engaging verbally, then you might be considered lack of participation. But now we know that kids participate in a variety of different ways. They're not always comfortable with a more extroverted, vocalized way of participation. And so I love that you brought that up, because I think that's another important part of the diversity that makes up our school community, and how we really get to know kids and how they're going to be successful.
Yeah, and our teachers are so creative. They come up with so many creative and innovative ways to really bring out the students in their classroom. And then the final word that I wanted to define was justice. And I actually have to admit that I've changed this. So on Monday, in honoring Dr. King's birthday, I was listening to Dr. Bernice King speak. And in her speech, she quoted her dad, and this was his definition of justice. And his justice is love correcting everything that stands against love. And that was just so beautiful to me. And I had to add that because I feel like that's how we teach at St. Anne's. Everything that we do is about love, about getting to know each other, who we really are, understanding each other, having compassion and mercy, being forgiving, right? That's the community that we are. And that's the lens through which we can learn about justice, through love. There are plenty of opportunities. Yeah, I know. I loved it. I just thought it just really touched me. And I actually listened to that part quite a few times this week. There are opportunities for families to get involved with diversity, equity, and inclusion practices at St. Anne's. This is just a few of them. But the first one, parents are invited to lead an affinity group. So an affinity group is a group that the students select based on one of their identities. So for instance, we have an affinity group for students of color because they asked for a group. So in order to lead an affinity group, you have to be able to speak from the I perspective to lead that group. So for instance, I could lead a group for girls. I could lead a group for students of color. I could lead a group for biracial students, but I couldn't necessarily lead a group for our Latinx students or our Asian American students, right? So the leader of the group has to be able to speak from the I perspective. So we invite parents to participate. Maybe there's a group that you feel the school should have. We welcome that. And of course, we would provide training on how to lead an affinity group. We have DEI parent chats from time to time, and that's just when parents come together, parents who are interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sometimes we talk about a particular topic. Sometimes we're talking about an issue that we're concerned about that maybe we see happening or we're concerned that might happen. It's also a place where creative and innovative ideas happen. Like, hey, why don't we try this? It's a great place also for parents to get to know each other and to build community that way. Some beautiful friendships have developed out of that group. This summer, an affinity group was formed. So after the murder of George Floyd, a mom reached out to me and representing other moms who were really interested in having cross-cultural or cross-racial conversations about what was happening in our world today. How what was happening in the news was affecting their children, was affecting their families, and really just wanted to learn how we could really listen to each other and how what's happening in the world affects us from our different perspectives. So we call it the Moms Group on Racial Socialization. We started meeting this summer every other week on campus outside. And we had some really, really meaningful conversations. People felt safe to open up and share very honestly, how they were feeling after the incidents of the summer and just in general of life, and how we have different experiences through life. As the summer wore on, we were ready for more. Like the group was ready to take on the world, and we really wanted to learn more and be leaders. So we actually engaged in this work, and this book is called "This Book is Anti-Racist," and it's by Tiffany Jewell. So we are working through this book as a group. And this book, much like our Pollyanna racial literacy curriculum, starts with identity work. Everybody has their notebook and their book, and we're talking about ourselves. We're digging deep and we're looking at ourselves closely. Like, who are we? What are all of the identities that make up who we are? And how do those identities affect how we move through the world and how we interact with each other at St. Anne's? After that, we're learning about microaggressions. What are they? Do we use them accidentally? What are we saying when we move out into the world? What are our kids hearing? And then if you are hearing microaggressions or dealing with them, how do you handle that, right? We learn about bias. We learn about institutional racism, systemic racism, stereotypes. It's great. So we also want our students to start doing this in the middle school. I introduced this book to our middle school advisors, and they're so eager. Everyone has a copy. So our older students will begin to do this work themselves as well, with the guidance of their advisor. We have a Culture Day celebration every year. This is one of my very favorite things. It has grown. This is a day where we spread out on our beautiful campus, and kids get to show off who they are with their families. So every student that wishes to participate, I think last time we had about 50 students who wanted to participate, sets up a trifold board. And on that board, they share anything that they want to share about their family and their culture. Sometimes people also wear traditional dress or bring food to share with everyone, play music, dance. It's just a chance for kids to shine and show who they are, and what they want the community to know about them that maybe we don't get to see every day. It's also a beautiful time for families to come together and present as a family, or even just walk around as a family and get to learn about other community members. Families are invited to lead a chapel. That's happened very frequently throughout the years. Maybe you want to lead a holiday celebration or something that's happening. That's invited. I know Chaplain Hannah and I often talk like, who do we know that might be interested in leading this chapel? That's always welcome. You're allowed to share familial traditions with your child's class. You can read a story that has a connection to your culture, to your child's class. And really, the ideas are endless. There isn't anything that I don't think we can't do. We just have to have the creativity and the willingness to venture out there and do it. So those are some of the opportunities for families to get involved.
Thanks for sharing those. I think that to your point, it's really about us continuing to grow as a community and learn from each other and learn ways that we can reveal our identities in a deeper way, so that we can understand and know each other and celebrate each other. And I know that myself, I've participated in various conferences that I've attended with you, Amy, several times been to the People of Color Conference, worked through different professional development on campus with our faculty. And in addition to the chats that our parents had this summer, I know Amy and Barry and I participated in several faculty chats as well, where we've talked about difficult issues and how to engage and sort of step into those spaces with our students, with our families, so that we can continue to be resources for each other as we continue to learn and grow.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to share. Hopefully you all can see that there's a lot of work that has been done over the years and that continues to be done on our path to helping our kids grow in wisdom and love and become those citizens that are going to give back to both their local and global communities. I do want to take a few moments before we close out the evening to see if those on the call have any questions. Barry, or if anyone else wants to add something to the conversation, I welcome that as well. And you can feel free to unmute or use the chat box, whatever you're more comfortable with.
Well, I just wanted to just really quickly to say that, there's not a more important time than right now. I mean, so we talk about all of these different things that we're doing, and they're great, but I think the sense of urgency that we need to make sure that folks understand is important as well, because we just we happen to be living in a time when there are so many things that pull us apart, and if we aren't intentional about finding ways to learn about each other and to communicate with each other, then we're going to have challenges going forward. Everyone here, when we think about our children, if we're not spending time teaching our children how to engage with each other, how to deal with you know, the times when they're not getting along. How do you build those relationships, and how do you come to the understanding that relationships are not about you always seeing eye to eye. Relationships are more times than not about how you manage to get yourself back to each other when things don't go exactly as you want. I just think, I mean, there really is not a day when I don't think about, are we doing all that we can be doing to build the relationships with our kids and with our families at the school? And so all that Amy has shared, and all the different initiatives, and even the ones that we will generate as we move forward, are going to be important. And so for our families, if there are things that you're thinking about, or again, we encourage you to get involved in what's already being done, because it really is critical time, and it's important for us to be active and to take action. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Barry. Are there other questions or comments and contributions that folks who are on the call would like to make?
Hi, thank you guys. This is Rebecca Keeley, mother of Bo Ennis.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, I just wanted to thank you guys. It just reaffirmed, we joined before all of the COVID stuff happened with the school, and we just really we're grateful. We're very grateful for everything that we're in pre-K, but everything that my son's come back doing all this year has been amazing. And we're very grateful, been very happy with what the school, all the inclusion, all of you guys that we see every day. And my son's name, and it's very appreciative, as well as everything that he's come back with, all the different religious aspects that he's come back and talked about for a 5-year-old. It's amazing. So we're very appreciative of you guys.
Well, thank you for saying that. And we're appreciative of you and the opportunity that you give us to get to know your family and to work with your son.
Yeah, we can't wait till we get to do more in person. That's a huge thing for everyone, I know, but we're grateful for these opportunities as well.
Absolutely. And I think that time is coming. Many of the things that Amy spoke about are things that happened on our campus, and we've adjusted and been able to find ways to continue the work. But we're looking forward to that day too, when we can all gather again and really to get to know each other deeper on a much more personal level by being able to share that time face to face.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Well, I know how precious your time is in the evening, and so I do want to thank everyone for taking the time to be with us. This work is important work. It's really threaded through the fabric of all that we do at St. Anne's. And as I said at the beginning, this is just the first of a series of winter webinars that we are going to be hosting. They will all be recorded. And so if you can't join us in real time, we do encourage you to check them out. We have lots of folks from St. Anne's that we're going to be introducing to you over the next few weeks as an opportunity to get to know us on another level and learn more about the work that we do at St. Anne's. So thank you again all for joining us. Have a lovely evening, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye now.